The town of Dry Creek was the kind of place forgotten by maps and mercy. Its streets shimmered under the desert sun, where even the wind moved slow, as if tired of carrying so much dust and silence. The only sound that ever broke the monotony came from the highway beyond the ridge, the low, rumbling chorus of motorcycles echoing off the rocks like distant thunder. They called themselves the Iron Wolves, a brotherhood of leather, scars, and restless engines. Every few months, they roared through Dry Creek for gas and coffee, staying just long enough to remind the townsfolk that danger still wore a human face. That afternoon, their engines rolled into the parking lot of Eddie's Diner, where tired travelers and truckers sipped coffee too burnt to complain about. Behind the counter, Lila Henderson tried to smile as she poured refills, but the tremor in her hand betrayed her calm. A faint bruise circled her wrist, half hidden beneath her sleeve. Her daughter, Mara, sat in the far booth, legs dangling, coloring on napkins with a broken blue crayon. She couldn't read the menu, but she could read her mother's eyes, tired, watchful, afraid of something that never stayed gone for long. The bell above the door jingled as a gust of heat swept in, carrying the scent of oil and sweat. Cole Dawson, leader of the Iron Wolves, stepped inside. His presence filled the room like a shadow that knew its power, but didn't need to prove it. His hair was silver at the temples, his beard trimmed close, his gaze sharp and unhurried. He had the kind of stillness that came from surviving too much. "Coffee," he said, voice low, gravel smooth. Lila nodded quickly, filling a cup and sliding it toward him. Her sleeve slipped, and the bruise caught the light. Cole noticed, but didn't comment. Experience had taught him that some truths were better approached sideways. He watched her work, the quiet grace with which she balanced fear and kindness. The other bikers laughed among themselves, gruff voices and heavy boots, but Cole's attention stayed on her. Something about that look in her eyes, like she'd stopped believing in rescue, stuck to him like a thorn. Then the diner door banged open. Rick. The sound alone made Lila flinch. Rick Lawson. Her boyfriend staggered in, the stink of whiskey wrapped around him like cheap cologne. His shirt was half untucked, his face red and mean. The room tensed without a word. He spotted Lila near the counter, eyes narrowing. "You talking to these bikers again?" "I'm just working, Rick," she said quietly. He laughed, sharp and cruel, then grabbed her wrist, the same one with the bruise. "You always got an excuse, don't you?" The entire diner went still. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. Cole's fingers tapped once against his cup. The air felt heavy enough to choke on. One of the wolves' techs shifted his weight. "You ought to ease up, friend." Rick turned, eyes glassy with defiance. "Ain't your business, cowboy." Cole's tone came quiet, but cold enough to cut glass. "She's serving coffee, not swinging fists. Maybe sit down before you forget where you are." For a moment, no one breathed. Rick's jaw tightened, and he let go of Lila. "This ain't over," he spat. He stumbled out, the bell above the door jangling behind him like nervous laughter. The wolves went back to their food. Lila whispered a thank you that Cole pretended not to hear. He just nodded once, the gesture enough. Later, as dusk swallowed the horizon, the bikers prepared to leave. Engines flared, headlights cut through the rising dust. Mara stood by the window, tiny and still, watching the men who looked like legends ride away. Tex noticed her gaze and winked, tossing her a small iron badge shaped like a wolf's head. "For luck," he said. She clutched it like treasure. Cole glanced back at the diner one last time, seeing Lila's silhouette framed by neon light. Something about that image, The fragile woman behind the glass, the bruise, the quiet gratitude, followed him long after the road swallowed them whole. Night crept over Dry Creek, with a silence that pressed against the walls of the trailer where Lila and Mara lived. The desert wind moaned through the power lines. Inside, the television flickered without sound. Lila washed dishes, each clink of porcelain sharp in the stillness. Rick's truck pulled up. Her hands froze. The door burst open before she could speak. "You think you can embarrass me in front of people?" His voice was low, dangerous. Mara peeked from the hallway, clutching her doll. "Mama?" Leela turned, eyes wide. "Go to your room, baby." The sound came next. A crash, glass shattering, her mother's scream breaking into the night. Mara's small body moved on instinct. She slipped out the back door barefoot, running through gravel and weeds, the moon her only witness. She didn't know where she was going, only that she had to find them. The men on the roaring bikes, the ones who weren't afraid. Her lungs burned. Tears streaked her face. She followed the faint echo of engines until her legs gave out on the empty road. In the distance, headlights glowed. 3 of them, slicing through the darkness. Mara stumbled forward, waving frantically. "Help! Please!" The motorcycles slowed, then stopped. The leader dismounted, pulling off his helmet. Cole's expression hardened when he saw her, barefoot, crying, bruised knees shining in the moonlight. "What happened?" he asked. "They're beating my mama," she sobbed. "He's hurting her." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then Cole exhaled, the sound low and final. He flicked his cigarette into the dust and looked back at his men. "Mount up." Engines ignited like thunder rolling across the earth. The desert trembled. As the wolves turned toward town, Mara clung to Cole's jacket, her small hands fisting the leather. Behind them, the horizon flashed with distant lightning. And somewhere between that flash and the next heartbeat, Cole Dawson understood. This night wasn't just a rescue. It was a reckoning.
The sound of engines shattered the quiet of Dry Creek as the iron wolves tore through the sleeping streets, their headlights cutting like blades through the dark. Mara sat on the fuel tank in front of Cole, her arms wrapped tight around his leather vest, her face pressed against the cold metal emblem that read Iron Wolves MC. The night smelled of oil, dust, and fear. When they reached the trailer park, Cole killed his engine. The other bikes followed suit, their lights dying one by one, until only the moon cast a dim silver glow over the rusted rows of homes. From somewhere near the end, a scream broke the stillness. Raw, desperate, unmistakably human. Cole turned to his men. "Tex, Hawk, back door. Smoke with me." They moved like ghosts. Gravel crunched beneath their boots. Cole's jaw tightened as they approached the trailer with peeling blue paint and a broken porch light that flickered like a heartbeat. Inside, a crash, then a muffled cry. Cole didn't knock. He kicked the door in. Rick stood in the center of the room, one hand raised, the other holding a shattered beer bottle. Leela lay on the floor beside the couch, blood at her lip, eyes wide in disbelief. Cole's voice dropped to a growl. "You want to hit someone? Try me." Rick blinked, dazed by the sudden intrusion. "You again? You think you can—" The rest of the sentence vanished under Cole's fist. Rick flew backward, the bottle clattering across the floor. For a moment, no one moved. Then Tex dragged Rick out by the collar and threw him into the dirt outside. Leela pushed herself up slowly, trembling. "Mara?" Mara rushed to her side, sobbing into her mother's torn shirt. Cole crouched, scanning the room. Overturned table, a hole in the wall, a picture frame shattered beneath a boot print. The man had been violent for a long time. Cole met Leela's eyes. "You can't stay here." "I don't have anywhere else." "You do now," he said. They brought Lila and Mara to the wolves' camp on the outskirts of town, a half-abandoned junkyard that smelled of fuel and sagebrush. A ring of motorcycles surrounded a bonfire that cracked and spit embers into the cool desert air. The flames painted the bikers' faces in fierce light, turning them into something between warriors and ghosts. Mara sat near the fire, staring at the dancing sparks. She still clutched the Iron Wolf badge Tex had given her. To her, it was magic, proof that monsters could be tamed and that heroes didn't always wear uniforms. Cole sat beside Cole, wrapped in a blanket. Her eyes darted toward the shadows whenever someone moved too quickly. "You didn't have to come," she whispered. Cole took a long drag from his cigarette, the ember glowing red. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I did." He looked at her for a long moment, seeing more than fear, seeing endurance. Beneath the bruises, there was strength. It reminded him of someone he'd lost years ago, someone who'd faced her own violence and hadn't made it out. When Lila finally spoke again, her voice broke. "I kept hoping he'd change." "They never do," Cole said, not unkindly. For a time, the only sound was the fire and the low hum of idling engines. Then Tex brought Mara a cup of cocoa, made from a dented can and lukewarm water. She sipped it gratefully, eyes sleepy but watchful. The wolves took shifts through the night, guarding the camp. Cole didn't sleep. He sat against his bike, staring toward the horizon as if the desert itself might attack. By dawn, the peace had already cracked. A sheriff's cruiser pulled into the camp, dust swirling around the tires. The man who stepped out was young, nervous, and entirely out of his depth. He scanned the row of motorcycles, then adjusted his hat. "Got a call from a guy named Rick Lawson. Says you folks kidnapped his girlfriend and her kid." Cole's voice stayed calm. "She came with us. You can ask her yourself." The deputy frowned. "I'm gonna need everyone to stay put until I sort this out." Behind him, Tex muttered, "You're gonna sort it out or sell it to Rick." The young man's hand drifted to his holster. "Watch your mouth." Cole stood, closing the distance until he was a shadow towering over the deputy. "Listen, son, that man you're talking about, he was beating a woman half his size while her little girl watched. You really..."
The black SUV rolled to a slow stop in the distance, its engine purring like a predator before the strike. Dust drifted lazily through its headlights. Cole watched from the shadows beside the barn, the silver edge of his knife glinting faintly in the dark. Every instinct screamed danger. Tex crept up beside him, whispering, "You think that's Rick's backup?" Cole's jaw tightened. Rick couldn't afford a car like that. That's something else. The SUV door opened. A tall man stepped out. Clean suit, polished shoes, and a look too calm for someone in Dry Creek. He scanned the yard like a hawk studying prey, then called out, "Cole Mercer?" Cole froze. That name hadn't been spoken aloud in years, not since he'd buried it under miles of desert dust. The man continued, "My name's Agent Randall, Department of Internal Affairs. We're not here for trouble." Tex muttered, "Then why bring it with you?" The agent's eyes cut through the dark. "Because trouble seems to follow your club wherever it goes." Cole stepped forward into the dim light. "You got something to say? Say it." Randall smiled faintly. "We've been tracking a case connected to a man named Rick Lawson. He's part of a trafficking network stretching from Arizona to the border. Your involvement tonight might have just exposed one of our key witnesses." Cole's expression didn't change, but his pulse quickened. "So you knew about him, and you let him keep hurting people?" "Sometimes," Randall said, "you have to let rot show itself before you can cut it out." Lila's voice broke the tense silence. She stood behind Cole, trembling. "You're telling me you watched him hurt people? You watched him hurt us?" Randall's face flickered, regret or calculation. It was hard to... By morning, the barn was no longer a sanctuary. Cole ordered the wolves to split, half to scout the surrounding area, half to prepare the bikes for a fast getaway. The desert wind carried the scent of heat and iron. Leela stood beside the doorway, watching the horizon. Her hands trembled as she wrapped Mara's scarf tighter. "How do we keep running from ghosts we can't see?" Cole tightened the straps on his saddlebag. "You don't run from ghosts, Leela. You face them before they find you." "Easy for you to say," she said bitterly. "You're not the one with a child." He met her eyes, quiet but steady. "I lost one once." Her anger faded instantly. "I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to." He looked away, the desert wind tugging at his jacket. "Now you do." As the sun bled into the sky, Tex returned, breathless. "We've got movement. 2 trucks coming in from the south. No plates." Cole's pulse kicked. "How far?" 10 minutes, maybe less." Randall moved to his SUV. "They found you. Stay put. I'll call in backup." Cole's hand shot out, grabbing him by the shoulder. "You call anyone. We're all dead before they arrive. You brought this heat here." Randall's eyes narrowed. "You think you can handle a hit squad with a handful of bikers?" Cole's smile was grim. "I know we can." They fortified the barn as best they could. Bikers took positions behind rusted cars, weapons drawn. The wolves moved with silent precision. This wasn't their first time facing death. Mara hid in a corner, clutching her mother's hand. "Mama, I'm scared." Leela knelt, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "Do you remember what I told you about brave hearts?" Mara nodded weakly. "Then keep yours steady, just like the wolves." The sound of approaching engines grew louder, closer, until the air vibrated with menace. Cole peered through a crack in the wall. Black trucks, dust billowing behind them, men with rifles visible in the back. He exhaled once. Here they come. Bullets tore through the barn's side like metal rain. The wolves returned fire, the night exploding with thunder and muzzle flash, the smell of gunpowder mixed with burning oil. Mara screamed, but Leela pulled her down, shielding her with her body. Randall ducked behind the SUV, shouting into his radio for air support.
The desert night held its breath before the storm. Dust swirled through the shattered barn door, the headlights of the oncoming trucks cutting through the dark like knives. Cole stood in the center of it all, still, silent, coiled. The wolves formed a crescent around him, their shadows flickering against the broken walls, the air trembling with the hum of distant engines. Leela crouched near the corner, shielding Mara beneath her coat. The child's small fingers clutched the iron wolf badge to her chest, as if it were a charm that could keep death away. "Cole," Tex said, reloading his shotgun. "There's too many." Cole's eyes didn't waver. "There's always too many." "Doesn't mean we stop." He turned to Lila. "When I tell you to run, you take the kid through the back. There's an old drainage tunnel. It'll take you to the creek bed. Don't stop, no matter what you hear." Lila's lips trembled. "I'm not leaving you." "You will," he said softly, "because she needs one of us alive." Mara tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, what about him?" Lila swallowed hard. "He's gonna make sure we can get away, baby." Cole smiled faintly at the little girl. "That's right, sweetheart. Wolves protect their pack." Then the first shot cracked the silence. The world exploded into sound and fury. Gunfire rattled through the barn like thunder trapped in a cage. Sparks flew as bullets struck steel. Smoke, fire, and adrenaline merged into a blur. Cole moved through it like a phantom, methodical, fearless. Every pull of the trigger was a promise kept. The wolves fought like men who had nothing left to lose and everything left to defend. Tex fell, clutching his shoulder. Smoke dragged him behind an overturned crate, returning fire with gritted teeth. "We're getting pinned, boss." Cole ducked behind a beam, eyes scanning the chaos. The black-clad shooters advanced in formation, disciplined, trained. These weren't hired thugs. They were professionals. Randall, wounded but conscious, crawled toward Cole. "You can't win this," he gasped. "They won't stop." Cole's expression was steel. "Then neither will we." He ripped a rag from the floor, doused it in fuel, and shoved it into an old oil drum. A single spark from his lighter set it ablaze. The fire roared to life, a burning wall between them and the advancing men. Shadows danced across the walls as the barn filled with choking smoke. "Go!" Cole shouted at Lila. "Now!" Lila hesitated for half a second, then grabbed Mara and bolted toward the back. The tunnel yawned open behind the collapsed shed. Cole fired one last burst, covering their escape. But then, Randall screamed. A bullet tore through his side, sending him crashing to the dirt. Cole lunged forward, dragging him behind the oil drum. "You brought this hell down on us," Cole growled, "but you're gonna help end it." Randall coughed blood, trembling. "You can't fight the system, Mercer. They'll erase you." Cole glanced toward the flames, his voice calm. "Then I'll make damn sure they remember why." Outside, the night erupted again, gunfire echoing off the desert cliffs. One of the black trucks exploded, flames licking the sky. The wolves had set their trap. Tex and Smoke emerged from behind cover, riding their bikes straight into the chaos, engines screaming, lights blazing. The sight was wild, apocalyptic, a pack of steel beasts charging into fire. Cole followed on foot, reloading, moving like a man possessed. Every step forward was a rebellion against every injustice he'd ever witnessed. He reached the SUV that Randall had driven. One of the shooters, masked, efficient, emerged from behind it, rifle raised. Cole was faster. One shot, one fall, silence.
Then, through the heat waves and dust, he saw her, Leela, running across the desert with Mara in her arms. Headlights followed them. Another truck had broken away, pursuing them down the dry creek bed. "Damn it!" Cole hissed, sprinting after them. Leela's lungs burned. The ground tore at her feet as she stumbled through the darkness. Behind her, Mara cried out, "Mama!" She turned, headlights closing in, voices shouting. But before the men could reach them, a roar cut through the night. Cole's bike burst from the ridge above, airborne for a heartbeat before landing in a storm of sand. He fired as he rode, the muzzle flashes lighting his face like lightning. The truck veered, skidding sideways before slamming into a rock. Silence followed, broken only by the sound of wind and distant flames. Cole stopped his bike beside Leela, breath ragged. "You two all right?" Leela nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You came back." "Didn't have anywhere else to go," he said with a weary grin. By dawn, the fire in the barn had burned itself out. The wolves who survived gathered around the wreckage, faces grim but proud. The sun rose slow and red over the desert, painting everything in gold and ash. Randall sat slumped against the SUV, pale but alive. He looked at Cole with something close to respect. "You just declared war, Mercer. They won't stop." Cole lit a cigarette, eyes on the horizon. "Then let 'em come. We'll be ready." He turned toward Leela and Mara, who